Hello again, this is Ruslan Belov. So what's going on with the US and Iran? Well, Iran did strike American bases in Qatar and Iraq. At the same time, there are talks of a potential ceasefire between Israel and Iran. But Iran was already launching ballistic missiles this morning. So it's unclear whether the ceasefire will hold or whether the strikes between Israel and Iran will continue for a long time in this tit-for-tat manner. Meanwhile, we continue monitoring the situation at the front. Let's move to the map. So friends, we have both very good and not so good news from the front. Which one should I start with? Let's start with the not so good news. It comes from the Sunumi region, near the very same village of Andriivka. If you watched yesterday's video, you'll remember I talked about how the Ukrainian armed forces launched a counterattack and managed to advance 700 meters on the southern approaches to Andriivka. The initial attack was repelled, and the Ukrainians couldn't establish control over the village itself. They ended up stuck in the tree lines on the southern outskirts. But as for the results of the second day of attacks, you can now see on the map, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to take the village, and it's now entirely under their control. The depth of their advance was 1.7 kilometers, and the area that came under Ukrainian control is 2.8 square kilometers, roughly 3 square kilometers. This is probably the largest advance the Ukrainian forces have achieved since their incursion into the Kursk region in August 2024. Since then, they haven't managed to gain even a kilometer, or 1.5 kilometers, let alone 3 square kilometers in area. That kind of progress simply hasn't happened. However, it's important to understand that this advance came at a very high price. This is not just empty talk. I posted a video in my Telegram channel. You can see the road leading to Andriivka on the map. That's the road the Ukrainians used for their assault. In the drone footage, just on that open stretch of road alone, there are 10 bodies of dead Ukrainian soldiers. That's just the road, an open area. How many more are in the tree lines? Or in the village itself? Honestly, that video really shocked me. I didn't expect their losses to be that high. Now, what about future prospects? I mean, do the Ukrainians have any real prospects of continuing this offensive? I won't say silly things like some military analysts who claim the loss of Andriivka means nothing and that the Ukrainians have no prospects at all. This isn't some major collapse for us, sure. But the Ukrainians will definitely ramp up pressure on Kondrativka. That village is already in a vulnerable position, with the Ukrainians pressing from both the west and the south. If they move north from Andriivka and then push in from the eastern outskirts, the Russian army might not be able to hold the village. It would be surrounded on 3 sides. But we'll see how it plays out. I'll say this. The Ukrainians don't have the forces to carry out a large-scale offensive here. So I wouldn't expect any serious problems. This is the first village they've recaptured in 6 months, and it's likely that's where things will stop. No need to panic either. Just for perspective, the Ukrainians took about 3 square kilometers here. You know how much the Russian army took in the past 24 hours? 23 square kilometers. Feel the difference? Their gain is minor. Yes, unpleasant, but still minor. Now let's talk about our advances. We had them, and they were significant. Let's start small. Also in the Sumy region, we advanced about 400 meters southeast of Yablunivka. The objective is clear, the N07 road to open access toward Krapivshchina. That's 1. And 2, for the potential encirclement of Yunakivka. The Russian army has nearly reached the road. Only 150 meters remain. As for Yunakivka itself, the American map here is a bit inaccurate. In reality, heavy fighting continues inside the village. The Ukrainian side controls only a third of it, and Russian forces are trying to squeeze them out of even that. It's difficult, honestly, because they're digging in. The fighting is brutal. Overall, the progress in Sumy region is difficult, especially over the past 2 weeks since the Ukrainians redeployed additional forces here. However, we are seeing good pace and breakthroughs on other sectors of the front. The first area where the Russian army achieved solid progress was in Luhansk region. Yes, a small portion of Luhansk is still under Ukrainian control, but yesterday we managed to take a significant section under our control. The depth of the advance was 3.3 kilometers, and we also took the village of Khrekivka, also known as Petrovskoye. This advance brought us to the administrative border of the Luhansk region. Just to give you an idea, what remains under Ukrainian control in Luhansk is minimal, just this little bit here, about 60 square kilometers and 2 settlements. That's it. The area taken by Russian forces here was almost 11 square kilometers, 10.8 to be exact. Looking forward, we'll need to mop up the northern pocket here. In fact, the entire section of Luhansk region here needs to be fully cleared. There are no other villages left. Kharkivka was the last one under Ukrainian control in this area, and now it's ours. As for the neighboring Lyman sector, unfortunately there has been no movement there lately. We were advancing well for a while, but things have stalled for now. On the northern front, things are quiet in terms of territorial gains, though fighting continues, especially in Serebryanka. And by the way, the Ukrainian forces tried to counterattack and retake one of the heights here. It was a suicide mission, and that's exactly how it ended. 8 killed, nearly 20 wounded, and that was that. I honestly don't know what they were thinking. The height is under our control. What were they hoping to achieve? They had no chance there. Now let's move on. We've got very good news from the Pokrovsk direction. Remember yesterday, I told you about the Russian operation to flank the Ukrainian garrison in the settlement of Udakny. We'll take a look at the result. Impressive, right? The maximum depth of our advance here was 5.3 kilometers. We cleared a massive area south of the most fortified Ukrainian stronghold on the western flank of Pokrovsk. Moreover, we even managed to enter the urban-type settlement itself. Not by much, but considering that we had been stuck here in positional fighting since January, with no gains at all, these 500 meters mean a lot. The total area taken under our control in this sector over the past day was 12.5 square kilometers. But what's even more important than the numbers is this. Udakny is now completely cut off from the south. Plus, there are now less than 2 kilometers left to reach the western outskirts, that is, to flank the Ukrainian garrison. 1 kilometer and 700 meters to be precise. Just 2 days ago, it was still 4.5 kilometers. So yes, the progress is obvious. As I told you earlier, if this fortified area can be fully cleared, then the Ukrainian western flank in Pokrovsk will significantly collapse. The largest concentrations of Ukrainian forces are located precisely in this area, near the mine and the urban-type settlement of Udakny. So we are closely monitoring this section together and waiting for more good news. Now, summing it all up, in the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces took control of 2.8 square kilometers during their counterattack, while Russian forces took 23.8 square kilometers. That gives the Russian army a net gain of 21 square kilometers. A strong and, most importantly, promising result, especially in the Pokrovsk direction, which had been completely stagnant for several months. And now things are finally moving, so that's it for the frontline situation today. Now a few words about politics. Russian forces have destroyed critically important scientific research centers in Kiev, and this was not by chance. Vladimir Putin dropped a hint which apparently went over the heads of those on Bankova Street. All of Ukraine is ours. That was a good hint, said General Popov. After a short pause, Russian aerospace forces resumed strikes on military targets in Kiev, this time targeting not only drone production facilities, but also key centers of Ukraine's military scientific research. This was reported in an interview with MK by military expert and honored pilot Major General Vladimir Popov, who emphasized that the actions of the Ukrainian armed forces are gradually pushing them back into the Stone Age. On the night of June 23rd, Russian forces launched a series of massive strikes on military targets in Kiev. As a result, buildings belonging to the Igor Sikorsky Kiev Polytechnic Institute were destroyed, and the Antonov aircraft plant, which develops and manufactures airplanes, was damaged. Strikes also hit the area of Giuliani Airport. According to sources, Kiev-based enterprises were involved in producing long-range missiles, including modified versions of the German Taurus missiles. Major General Popov stressed that these strikes allowed the Russian army to take a 2-year leap forward. He pointed to the strategic importance of the attacks, as they targeted the very core of Ukraine's aerospace engineering and technological innovation. This, in turn, will delay the development of Ukrainian specialists in this field. According to the expert, the consequences will be significant. Not only will physical production of drones halt, but the development of Ukraine's aerospace engineering ideology will be paused. Research laboratories will be forced into downtime, which will severely affect their work. Although the results won't be immediate, the developmental delay could last at least 2 years. Popov also noted that in the past, the Russian side considered Ukrainians as brothers, but now there's a pressing need to defend its own interests. The destruction of not only drone storage facilities, but also Ukraine's latest military R&D was a necessary step under today's realities. Planning for the future. Putin's hint with the United States increasingly supporting Israel, Ukraine may find itself pushed to the sidelines of the international agenda, something that deeply worries the military political leadership in Kiev. Popov warns that without foreign aid, the Ukrainian military and government will be unable to cope with the current challenges. Russian armed forces also carried out a strike on a Ukrainian training ground near the settlement of Davydiv Bride, on the border of Kherson and Mykolaiv regions. But this wasn't just an ordinary training site, it was a drone operator training facility. Ukraine suffered significant losses among its drone instructor personnel. According to the Telegram channel Legitimnost, the topic is being deliberately downplayed. This was another blunder by the Kiev headquarters, who were convinced that Russia wouldn't waste a missile on a training site that's been operating for more than a year and a half. That's all for today, friends. Thank you for watching and staying informed. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next update. Until then, take care.